let's start with talking a bit about, what you do, what kind of artist you are, and what kind of art you make.
Well, I spent 50 years playing the piano and then conducting, coaching singers and playing chamber music and doing all sorts of things in the classical music world, and also enjoying music outside the classical music world, although not that much. Jazz, a lot of jazz. And I grew up with classic Broadway and, the pop music of the 60s. But what I didn't do was anything that you might consider creative. And then almost exactly 12 years ago, in the middle of an emotional crisis, I suddenly got the idea of trying to help myself in a therapeutic way by writing a song about what I'd been through. And it was something that I didn't think anyone else should ever hear, and certainly a one-off. And I found it very helpful, as I say, in a therapeutic sense. And I also noticed that I could do it better than I thought, make something that hadn't been there before. And as difficult and almost agonizing as the process was, I also enjoyed engaging myself in that way on various levels. And since then, I would say I own up to being a pianist, a former conductor, a coach, and also a singer-songwriter.
Amazing. So what I really would like to hear more about is that incident, when everything kind of changed for you. So can you walk us through that first song you wrote? Like, how did you start? Did you start with lyrics? Did you start with a musical idea? And what was the moment of origin? Like, now I'm going to sit down and compose. Did it just happen to you, or was it more conscious?
Well, let me back up just a bit and say that I think that classical musicians in general, except for the ones who've always composed, are afflicted with a malady of spending our days laboring in the fields, in the valleys of the great giants. I'm not going to name any names, but we all know who I'm talking about. And we look up and then think, oh my God, I'm such a small little worm down here. I could never do anything of my own. And so I might as well not even try. And because I'd never tried, I felt confirmed in my total lack of talent to do anything creative. And in the situation that I said caused me to write my first song, I was so desperate. I was writing a lot of emails that I didn't send, and writing in a diary and scraps of paper, and all these thoughts. The wheels were turning really at high speed, and had nowhere to go. And the pressure, the internal pressure, was such that I didn't stop. And that was really the key. I didn't stop to think, can I do this?
Mm-hmm.
The combustion point had been reached, the critical mass had been reached. And so I didn't stop to think whether I, as such a small worm in the valley of Bach and Beethoven and all those people, could do it. I just did it.
Mm-hmm.
And the basis was all the stuff that I'd been writing text-wise, as I say, the unsent emails and the scraps of paper and the entries in my diary, and just trying to take stock of the situation I was in and the person who had caused this situation. And so I would say in this case, it started with a text, sort of content as text. And so I thought, why don't I try to make this a little bit more compact, a little bit more concise, put it in a form, maybe like make it more rhythmic and make it rhyme, you know, like with couplets or verses of four, something like that, and then set it to music. So that was how I did it the first time. But since then, my modus operandi is always something in me totally unexpectedly goes click about some sort of subject, some theme, something that interests me personally, but interest is not strong enough. I mean, a lot of things interest us. But since it takes me an average of 4 to 6 weeks to write a single song, it has to be more than interest. It has to be something that I really want to obsess about for the next month or month and a half. And then once I have that subject, or what I think is going to be the subject, I like to think of going for a little walk along the seashore and enjoying the breezes and looking out at the water and the waves and picking up little stones and shells and things like that and carrying them home with me. And out of those little pretty stones and shells, I acquire a certain basic stock that is going to be the core of the next song. And I don't think critically, does the one thing fit with the other? I just assume that pretty much anything that occurs to me that flies in through the window or through the door, text-wise, or in terms of musical scraps, little chord combinations or melody segments or something like that, I will somehow fit them all together. And I don't know how, but they will end up being my next song. And so I don't think in terms of, I try not to be critical at first. I just try to open myself and trust that anything that the world is giving me, or my inner instincts or something like that, is likely going to be part of the next song. And I have my little cell phone, and when I think of some little tune, I open the voice recorder and go la 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 da 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 da, and you know, and I don't think whether it's good or bad. I just record it, and then the next day I listen to it, and I realized that it was really pretty stupid. But every now and then, I think, okay, maybe, you know, there's something there. I'm not going to erase it. And so little by little, these little scraps, you know, these little motes of dust flying through the air collect and start to form something that, as I say, is going to be the core. And then at some point, after about 2 or 3 weeks, I feel like, okay, my collecting expeditions I've brought home enough little pretty shells and stones and stuff like that to get started. And then I sit down and start to do the actual work of writing the song.
That's very interesting. I think it's very true that you have to be open in that first part of the creative process, because if you start to think too much, to judge too much, to try to make sense of everything right then and there, it wouldn't work. You would kind of, yeah.
Well, I think that's probably one of the ways I got in my own way for 50 years. I would have some sort of idea, you know, like la da 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 da, and I thought, oh, Ted, that's stupid. Please, go play some Beethoven, you know, like, and I would nip it in the bud, and whatever impulse I had, I would just shut it out by saying no. And as I say, the key to my breaking through and entering this room that had been waiting for me for a long time was I was so I was suffering so much that I didn't stop to say no. I just did it. And so that's the key, as you say, not to criticize it, but just to open yourself.
That's very true. And I definitely want to come back to that one. I have one question that just occurred to me. Do you have any thoughts on why this is the exact form of music that you make? I mean, you could, for example, you've been, you know, a pianist more than anything else, I think, and a conductor, of course, but the piano seems to be like your center as a musician. So you could have as well just, you know, written instrumental pieces for piano or gone into doing music that is less modern, because your art songs, they have that modern feel to it as well. It's not a classical art song. It's also not a musical song. It's also not necessarily a Broadway song. It's something in between. So
there's a lot of things it's not. That's true. But we won't emphasize that.
No, but I'm really curious, like, why do you think this was the form that you chose intuitively in that moment?
That's an interesting question. And if you don't mind, I'll just go think about that for a few minutes and I'll get back to, no, it's funny because as you know, we've just started some crowdfunding for a musical film project. And one of the people I reached out to is an American tenor who is now, he'll be turning 87 next week. He's still active. He teaches a lot. But when I first went to New York, almost 50 years ago, about 48 years ago, I worked a lot with him, helping him prepare for art song recitals. And I think that was what planted the seed in me, because it is, as you know, it's a very, I mean, I've spent my entire career in opera. But an art song, you know, for one person singing and another person playing the piano, it's so intimate, it's so intense. You're responsible for everything and you're forming a partnership with someone else. And that just really seems to be very close to me. And I must say also, I've always enjoyed language and trying to find the right way or an interesting way of expressing something. And as you know, I write the lyrics for my songs as well as the music. And I've always sung to demonstrate for real singers in coachings, you know, or conducting. But that made me very aware that I'm not a real singer. I mean, a singer goes through years of very intense training. You don't just sing. But I think some of that work with the singers rubbed off on me. And I do think that I have, as I say, untrained, but I have pretty healthy instincts in terms of using my voice, and I enjoy it. And my father had always sung as part of an amateur men's chorus when I grew up in Cleveland, and I loved going to their concerts. So I think a lot of these things came together. My obviously, as you say, that the basis as a pianist and all the intense contact and work I'd had with singers, classical singers, and enjoying using my voice that way, and also my involvement with lyrics and poetry and expressing myself through language. And so suddenly, when I wrote this first song, that just seemed the obvious choice. And a lot of people have said, you know, you should write some piano music, or, you know, you should write an opera, or, you know, you could write chamber music or symphony. And probably, if I put my mind to it, I could. But I've written 102 songs now and nothing else. And nothing else interests me. That just seems, I just seem to have fallen into that as the right the right way of expressing myself. And when I'm sitting at the piano, singing and playing my songs for people, it involves every part of me.
Yeah.
So I guess that's the answer. Just it it includes all the different things that I think I can do or would like to be able to do.
I think it's really interesting because in that sense, your music is art songs, because with a classical art song, the piano and the vocals are equals. So it's not like in modern music where oftentimes the instrumental is just there to support the singer. Obviously not all types of modern music, but a lot of the time it is like that. Or they have a subordinate role. But in your music, that's not the case. And I think it's really true that it expresses all of you. And it's like, there are actually two singers. One is singing, one is playing, and they're both having a conversation of some sort. And that's
very interesting. You should say that. If I can just say a couple things about that. First of all, in most classical art songs, with very, very few exceptions, the pianist is a partner to the singer, but never gets to really do a solo. I mean, at the end of Schumann's Dichterliebe, it's left to the pianist to really pull everything together, to sum it all up. And in other songs, every now and then, there's an introduction or a postlude or something bridging the verses or something like that. But I think perhaps because I was aware the whole time that I wasn't really a singer, but a pianist. The way my songs are, I try to keep myself occupied as a pianist while I'm singing, but hold myself back so I don't get in the way too much of the words that are being transported and the melody and the sound of the voice. But at some point in almost every song, in the middle or, somewhere, the singer steps aside, and as you say, I can sing as a pianist and think, okay, now I've been modest and considerate and polite long enough. Now you got out of the way. Now and it's really true, because not only in terms of the musical material that's being handled in every song, but also the theme. I mean, the emotional content, the non-musical message, that speaks to me as a pianist too. Mm-hmm. And so why shouldn't the pianist also have a way of engaging with this content that is separate, independent of the singer? And so I'm throwing in my two cents worth as a pianist too, but we're both engaging with the same material.
Yeah, you're talking.
That's something you don't usually get in a classical art song.
That I agree on. I think it's very interesting, because sometimes I have the feeling, and that's obviously maybe too specific for now, but that you talk about the same things as a singer and as a pianist in your song, but you're not necessarily saying the same things about the topics. But that's something to discover maybe for the audience.
I could have saved myself the last 2 or 3 minutes and just let you say that one sentence. You are recording this, aren't you? Because I want to write this down. That's perfect. That's exactly what it is.
That's what I find so interesting, that you get a different view on certain topics. The song that I remember when we talk about this is one that you recently played to me, Scars. Where I think that's, for the audience to try, have a listen to some of Ted's songs and listen out for these things. I want to go back to the notion of not being a proper singer, real singer. To be honest, like, I have a classical training. I consider myself a real singer, but I have been humbled over the last years in regards to, when you start out and you learn everything and you think after 10 years of singing, you're ahead of the average singer in a way, technically, maybe skill-wise, maybe. But then you come across someone who really doesn't know what they're doing, but they can move people with their voice. And it really doesn't matter in that moment that they have like a spectrum of a few notes only, or that their pitch is not great always. And I think you are a singer in that moment when you decide to go out there and sing. That is what makes you a singer. I'm not sure that works for other instruments. Like, I'm not the greatest pianist in the world, and I wouldn't call myself a pianist. But I think you are a musician if you decide to go out there and play and sing and do that. And if you can reach even just one person with that. So I think that has changed over the years. Musicians, there's so many musicians out there who will never have an audience or will maybe never reach many people, but does that make them less of a musician? It's very hard to define these things nowadays. I guess it used to be easier a few hundred years ago when it was an actual profession, or you just didn't really do it, or you just did it on the side learning, but never really, I don't know, maybe I'm getting that wrong.
No, that's very true. I'd just like to say two things about that. First of all, I have heard a number of singer-songwriters, I mean, famous ones like Bob Dylan, who they don't really have very good voices. And then there are others, you know, like Joni Mitchell, who was a wonderful singer. And I think also Billy Joel was good, or Elton John. But I think as a singer-songwriter, I can pretty much sort of write my own ticket.
Mm-hmm.
And that sort of joins up with the second thing I wanted to say, which is I love it when other people sing my songs. I mean, you sing my songs gorgeously. And once or twice, I've had the pleasure of hearing a baritone. I mean, if I were a real singer, I'd probably be a baritone. Hearing a real classically trained baritone sing one of my songs, my God, what a pleasure that was. And I sat there thinking, oh, that's how this could sound.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I console myself, if you want to call it that, with the thought that a lot of people can sing my songs better than I can, but nobody can sing them like me.
That's very true. Yeah.
Because it's coming, as they say in English, straight from the horse's mouth. You know, I wrote it, every note and every word came out of me. And I think perhaps some of that is, you feel that in the way I sing and play it, that this is me talking, you know, even if the voice isn't that great, it's what they call authentic.
Yeah. And I mean, imagine what it would be like if we would have recordings of Schubert and Schumann maybe playing and singing their own songs, which they must have done, you know, when they wrote them, I guess.
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That would be very interesting. I want to go back to some of your songs. So I'm interested, do you have any particular songs that are more dear to you than others? And do you have a certain story around them? So for example, one of the first songs I wrote, something that's not even released right now, is a song that I wrote when I was in a really bad place. And similar to what you described, you just go to the piano, you just start something, it just comes out of you. Do you have one or two songs that you'd like to mention that are more intense in the way they came out than others?
Well, I've made 7 CDs now, and I have to admit, although I'm not too happy about it, that a lot of the songs on the first CD of 12, they have perhaps a directness, a rawness, and intensity that I don't want to say I was able to get past, but you know, when I've written a song, that song's been written and I don't have to write it again.
Mm-hmm.
So songs like All Right from the first CD, or even something that seems sort of jokey like Tough Guy,
Mm-hmm.
they are very close to me and definitely someone I used to know.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there is something in that song that always, it touches people in so intensely that I've sort of stopped performing it for people because the effect it has on them, it's just, it makes me uncomfortable to have that strong a spark going over. And certainly my very first song, which I thought that no one must ever hear, because it was that's really the only song that I would say is identical with me. All my other songs, they come out of me, but they're not the same as me.
Yeah.
No.
So that song is not released?
It's on the first CD.
Ah, okay.
And it bears a name, and I have never performed it in public, and I never will.
Mm-hmm.
But it's out there for anybody to hear.
Yeah.
And I have to say also, what saves me in, I don't want to say the opposite of what you're saying about songs that are especially close to me. When I write a song and it's finished, it's come out of me, but when I sing it or share it with somebody else, I want it to have a life of its own. And that life is not, I don't think, has really that much to do with me. It goes into somebody else's ear and somebody else's mind and somebody else's heart. And it can acquire, I hope, a totally different, almost personality, certainly life of its own there. And so in a way, I feel like when I share a song with somebody else, I have to go there personally, but then I'm actually just the messenger, and the song has to stand or fall on its own in the other person's mind. And so that gives me a sense also of a kind of a healthy distance between me and my creation.
Yeah, very interesting. Let's talk a bit more about the creative process itself. So obviously we've discussed this to some extent, but so what would you say, let's go a bit broader, what would you say in regards to life events, moments in your life, phases in your life, influenced the topics that you're talking about and the feel and the mood and the kind of the universe of your songs? Like which events would you say had an influence on it? So for me, for example, it's definitely relationships. It's definitely, losing someone, death or illness, that sort of stuff that kind of leaves its mark. But you can always tell that some things for some reason just have a bigger impact and they come through, whereas other things just don't. So how do you experience that?
Well, two things about that. First of all, what caused the explosion that finally led me to my first song or my first songs was this very wrenching emotional experience. But what it did for me was bring me into contact in an active, creative way that I'd never allowed it before, with feelings that I had and that were there to be mined. And so I think, having been brought to those feelings, I can take up contact with them anytime. I've opened myself to them. And so they're there for me. And they're also there as a source of my creativity. And at the end of one song, where I describe having come to my first song, it's called Lost and Found. I say, but then I dried my tears, looked within, saw a door, and I went through and found my song. And that's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
But in terms of life events in general, I think everything that we've experienced, certainly early on, but even now, can still influence us if we let it. I think we sort of grow with thick skin, and we develop our ways and means of dealing with things, and that things are filed away in with similar experiences. But in a way, I think we can still be touched and moved by anything that could happen. And it's uncomfortable opening ourselves to that. But if we do that, I think that is what releases the creativity that we need to bring something forth that wasn't there before. But when people say to me, oh, wow, you went on a road trip in America, I can hardly wait to hear the songs that will come out of that. Or, oh, wow, look at that, or, oh, that'd make a good song. It doesn't work that way. Something else, somewhere else in me chooses what I'm going to write songs about. It's never something where I think, oh, I should write a song about that.
Yeah, that's the same for me. I can't decide what to write about. It just happens. From one of the last few songs that you wrote, is there, can you walk us through the discovery, when, for example, the last song you wrote, what event kind of jumpstart that song? Sorry, what event jumpstart that song?
Okay, well, since I can't really think of many songs right now, there's a song that I think I sent you a recording of called Déjà Vu. And for years and years and years, I've had a little dream where I'm in an old abandoned house with big rooms, and it's sort of along a road by a stream. And I used to do something creative there. I was involved in some sort of group activity there. But there are many rooms in that house, and I have no idea where that came from. But for years and years, I've had that feeling. And so it led me to this idea of a song about it being a hot summer day and everything's hazy, and I just go for a walk, and I'm going along a little road along a stream or a river, and I come to a house, and it feels somehow familiar to me. Now, what I describe in the song is totally different, but what it has in common with that is this sense of déjà vu, and also there are days, I have this other song that I recently posted on YouTube called One of Those Days. That also, there's some days where I just go out onto the street and the synapses in the brain, they're a little off, which is what déjà vu is. It's like they're not functioning the way they're supposed to. So you're like getting a double impulse, and you think, oh, I've experienced it, or I've thought that, or I've said that before, or wasn't that person just there? And it gives a certain additional dimension to everything that's going on, and I just love that. So it's really about opening myself to something in the atmosphere around me and inside me, and letting myself in on that. That's
beautiful. I totally agree. For me, music making is easier for my own little universe of what music I do. But the writing, I can only do either when I'm outside surrounded by people, but by myself, like in a coffee shop or on the street, in the park, whatever, or when I'm in a really bad state emotionally. Then those two things really will open up the door. Or, emotionally feeling strong about something. It could be a happy emotion as well. Sometimes it is.
What's good for me for getting ideas? I want to quote two famous people about creativity, because they seem to contradict each other. Charlie Chaplin who was a very creative guy, was asked where he got his ideas. And he said, well, I have to go out looking for them. They don't just come to me. I have to go hunting for the ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And Pablo Picasso famously said, I don't seek, I find.
Mm-hmm.
Well, for me to try and make those two statements meet in the middle, I have to say, I can't force it.
Mm-hmm.
I can't force the ideas to come. The muse has to come visit me.
Yeah.
But I have to also open the windows and call out to the muse. Hi, here I am. You haven't forgot me, I hope. I'm ready, and just open my receptors. And I remember an old friend of mine who was also a very creative guy said to me that the key to the ideas and the creativity is peripheral vision.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, obviously you have to look where you're going, but if you're only looking where you think you're going to miss out on a lot that's going on the left and the right. And if you open yourself to that, then you'll find all sorts of impulses. And I have to say also, the impulses, they're there. Everything is there all the time.
Yeah.
We just have to serve ourselves and know how to serve ourselves.
Yeah, it's knowing what can trigger you, and you can sometimes pull those triggers yourself. So a few years ago, I did like a challenge for another crowdfunding campaign where I composed a little piece of music, like usually 1.5 minutes every day for 30 days in a row. And
Oh my
that
God.
that was really challenging. And in the beginning, I thought I can't do it. But then I realized like my favorite piece that came out of that time, I wrote on a day where it took me 2 hours to get into a place to write something. And I thought it wouldn't be possible and I was about to give up, but then I just kept going. And then eventually something was there. So I think,
You broke through.
Yeah. As artists, we're often, as you said before, earlier in your life, we're often in our own way and we keep ourselves from doing the things that we want and should be doing. So it's learning about what we need as an artist is important.
May I describe two situations that I find very fruitful for me in terms of ideas?
Yeah.
One is the state, and I'm going to display two of my favorite words in the English language. One is hypnagogic, which is the state between waking and sleeping. And the other is hypnopompic, which is the state between sleeping and waking. So, I mean, supposedly, officially, they're different states, but what they have in common is that the doors are open between the conscious and the unconscious. And I think that the real, I mean, the incredibly prolific creative geniuses like Mozart and Schubert and Duke Ellington, they always had all those doors open.
Mm-hmm.
And so I try to make a point, especially when I'm waking up, to force myself to get up or at least roll over, and I have a little pad by the bed and scribble it down, because I know once I'm completely awake, I'll forget it.
Yeah.
Because there's something about our conscious mind that closes itself off to what's going on in the subterranean levels, but it's there that the ideas happen. It's in the shadows, in the mud, in the darkness, in the vagueness, in the things that are not clear. That's where the ideas come from. Yeah. And the other situation that I find very helpful for getting ideas is when I'm riding my bicycle. Because when I'm riding my bicycle, I'm usually riding somewhere. I'm not just like, riding around at random. I'm usually on my way to go somewhere. So I have a destination. But at the same time, I'm in motion. The world is is spinning around me. It's constantly changing. The wheels are turning, and I'm free. I feel completely free, and I have to pay attention.
Mm-hmm.
So all those
Yeah.
things I find are very good, very helpful conditions for getting ideas.
Yeah, that's kind of yeah, I can relate to that. For me, it's funny enough. I mean, I dream a lot. I never
I'll bet
sleep
you do.
without dreaming. I basically experience like the 8 hours of sleep as a continuous dream every night. But I have never written a song about anything I've dreamt. Never. For me, but the state is similar. For me, it's when I listen to music, certain types of music, or when I go for a walk, that I think is similar to the bike thing. When I just move and see things and light and nature and people, that sort of stuff that triggers things. Right. I have one last question to round everything up. Do you have any artists that are emotionally closer to you than others? Obviously, I mean, you must listen to, read, and seek out to see lots and lots of different types of art. But if you could name, let's say, one artist right now that at the moment influences you or emotionally touches you, which would you name?
Well, we've discussed this guy before. There is a composer, and I don't listen to his music or think about him ever. But when I do hear something by him, and I recently recorded a piano part by him that you're going to sing to, I've always felt a very great closeness to him, and it's Gabriel Fauré, a French composer of the mostly 19th and early 20th century. And there's something about him that is sort of cool and French and controlled and cerebral and almost a little bit subdued. And at the same time, you feel there's a tremendous undercurrent of really strong emotions going on. And he has a talent for finding chord progressions, harmonic things that just do it for me.
Yeah.
How about you?
I could tell when you recorded that the piano part. It's very interesting to see you like this, because you're usually very I don't want to say controlled, because that's not the right word, but I hardly see you carried away while you're playing. You know what I mean? You're always in control in that sense, in a good way. So that's very interesting how people react to certain things. I agree. Like the song that we are recording is very beautiful, and so is his whole work.
It's funny you should say that, because as you know, I've made a lot of recordings, video recordings of myself for a concert we're doing together in the past couple of weeks, and unfortunately I have to watch them too, and I do not like that. But I'm always super impressed by how totally unemotional I look at the piano. And all I can say, and also when I'm singing too, unless I really try to consciously change my facial expression occasionally or something like that. But all I can say is I'm totally concentrated on the sound, on what's going on the acoustic level. And in a way, as a physical, visible personality, I have no consciousness of myself. It's almost as if I don't feel I'm really there, and there's nothing to see. It's all in the hearing.
Yeah. Yeah, I can relate to that to some extent. Like vocally, there are a lot of things that are going on, and you want to. It's very easy to focus on the sound only, but when I experience, that feeling of being overcome by the music and almost being led through it rather than being in control, that's what I enjoy the most. All right, thank you so much for joining me for this very interesting interview.
Thank you very much. And I do hope that at some point you will give me the honor of interviewing you.
Yeah, maybe we turn it around in the.
I'd love to, because I have lots of questions too, and you have fascinating insights too, I have to say.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And I'll be posting the songs that we mentioned in the description of the video.
Thank you.
So if you want to check those out, do that. And otherwise, I'll see you with the next interview. Bye.
Bye.